What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the Fall 2015 mixtape by Migos, Back to the Bando. So this project is one that was kind of a number of projects that Migos put out in 2015. They did drop an album in the summer of 2015, which was called Young Rich Nation. But they were kind of still on the mixtape grind of it. They hadn't quite wholesomely blown up with albums like Culture and songs like Bad and Bougie and Slippery and some of those type songs. But they did have a pretty large hit on this particular project with Look at My Dab, which was kind of an interesting one. But really, the thing about this project that I didn't know originally was the fact that I kind of forgot about the fact that Offset went to prison for like 8 months back in 2015. So he's not even on this project. It's Takeoff and Quavo that Offset's not even on this project, so it's Takeoff and Quavo who wind up doing this project, and that's kind of the thing about it. So it's interesting enough to kind of get this. It's not wholesomely like the entire package of Migos, but this is a pretty damn solid project. This is one of the most recent projects that they did in terms of a mixtape format, and they dropped quite a few mixtapes in the 2010s and stuff, but this is probably one of the better ones. I like this one better than I like Rich Nigga Timeline. It just has a lot more flashy type vibes about it, and it's an early kind of bite of the stuff that they would do on Culture. I mean, they were pretty much just on the cusp of blowing up with songs like Bad and Bougie and Slippery, and like there's another single from that album like T-shirt and some of those type songs. I just would have to say it's pretty solid. I do feel like they had like a lot of mixtape hunger on here, and they got 4 music videos off of this project, and some of these are pretty gemmy and that type of stuff. This is actually, I would say that this is a pretty trap centric project. A lot of this reminds me of like the Gucci Mane and Zaytoven type stuff. It has some pretty local and ground level type hustle cuts on here. It's not blue collar type feels that this album gives, but it does have like some day commute kind of hustler music, and it also kind of has like a cooler weather kind of wintry type feel too. I feel like when I review so many projects and they just feel like summer classics and that type of stuff, this is actually an album or a mixtape that feels pretty winter oriented and just has some chilly kind of weather type tunes. I feel like a couple of those, for example, would be like Asking for Money and Slangin', and I want to say like Check or just some ones that kind of do that in terms of some of that concept. But it's just kind of interesting just to get some of these. Yeah, this is a pretty rock solid project. So there are 4 music videos from this project: Look at My Dab, Forrest Whitaker, Trap Problems, and Say So. And these kind of had like underground kind of vibes, kind of similar to the stuff, a little bit more low key. I feel like they broke out more with songs like Fight Night and Handsome and Wealthy in 2014. But this does at least have some gems on here that it's just kind of like where they're just kind of vibing a bit. This project is more of a vibe more so than their 2014 and 2013 stuff, just because they had some commercial gloss of being able to chart, just because they had at least charted by this point, but it's not quite commercial centric like they would be on Culture and a little bit of No Label 2 from 2014. So it's just kind of an in between type stuff where like the Young Rich Nation album was kind of brief, and I just feel like that promotion, that project just got kind of wrapped up pretty quickly, possibly because Offset was in prison for that album. But I just kind of look after it where these are like, it's kind of like what Gucci Mane would do, where I feel like some of these, it's kind of like what Gucci Mane would do, where some of these do kind of have like chart potential. Like I do feel like some ones on here, like Look at My Dab is probably like one of the most commercial songs on here, but I also like the kind of smoky, kind of murky, kind of street single feel of Forrest Whitaker. And then I would have to say like Trap Problems is another kind of murky type trap song that actually has some gloss towards it, just in a more kind of day commute or just after hours kind of commute type feel of it. Yeah, there's just some good kind of trap gems on here too, like Check and Say So and some of those type ones. So we'll go ahead and get into the singles, and I'll talk more about this project because it's a pretty glossy album. I would have to say it's got a lot of. We'll go ahead and talk about the singles because there's a number of good compact kind of projects on here. It just has like a real kind of, this mixtape kind of has an in between type feel where it's kind of a house party type fare. It's not quite as thoroughly in the club as much. I feel like songs like Forrest Whitaker, Look at My Dab, and maybe like Check in a couple of these songs. I'll point out some more of the club songs later on, but a lot of this just kind of has a lot more local around the trap type feels around it, or local just around residential areas, just house party type stuff. It's just kind of, I like the fact that Migos kind of did some of that both type stuff where it could be just pretty much just kicking around your headquarters and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. just being able to kind of sit back and just smoke a blunt around there in some of those type moments. This is just kind of very breezy, and especially just kind of more chilly weather type feel towards it. I look after it like this is not quite the full blown like humongous party. I felt like there were probably more kind of crazed bops on like Rich Nigga Timeline from 2014 and even No Label 2. There's nothing as crazy as like Fight Night or something like that. But Look at My Dad was a pretty rock solid club bop. So we'll go ahead and talk about some of these club ones and some of these singles and music videos. I'm at least going to talk about because I know that at least Look at My Dad was released as a single and that did chart on the Billboard, but I'm going to say that the other 3 songs that they released as music videos, I'll just kind of talk about those in single format also. So the first single is Look at My Dab. This is just a very blurry, floaty kind of club bop with its own dance towards it. It's just kind of a poppy type tune, and it's very commercial. This has a very airy type beat. I feel like it's just really kind of like pretty glossy. It's just a different kind of sound because it's not necessarily 2010s trap as much. I mean, I feel like it's more recent, but it just kind of feels different from the sort of bass heavy 808 type stuff that they would do throughout the mid late 2010s and stuff. It just kind of just feels a lot more polished and a lot more kind of pop centric. It's just interesting kind of get a mixtape song with that sort of commercial appeal as far as that kind of goes. This is a real kind of easy kind of gem that just was kind of what mixtapes were doing throughout the early 2010s and stuff, where folks would get those singles and it just would be kind of interesting. Because this is a free project, this is kind of like a burner. It's just kind of a burner of a song and a bubbler of a song. It's just a good, nice one. Great hook on there. Just a good concept of just an easy kind of free mixtape cut that is a pretty solid club bop. And it's just like a miniature version of like Bad and Bougie without all like the bells and whistles of like, it's kind of like a miniature version of Bad and Bougie just without the sheer kind of like gloss bite of that. But it is pretty poppy. It's pretty close. Just like a kind of, it's just like a younger brother, that particular beat. It's a free version of it. Another music video from this project is Forest Whitaker. This is a pretty good gem on here. This is a smoky kind of night venue gem. It just has a real relaxed pace and it just feels like a Blaze One kind of tune. Good song to smoke out to. Just be stoned as hell when you're in the club and that type of stuff. Just kind of real murky and kind of muddled and just kind of feels like you're stuck and keyed and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just would have to say it's an easy kind of one for stepping out and just kind of being just a little bit more addled and that type of stuff as far as just kind of taken aback. But it's a little bit more toned down in energy than Look at My Dab, I would have to say. But I do like this one. It's another gem. Trap Problems is another song that got a music video for it. This is kind of a murky, kind of low-key trap bop on here. It's just got a sluggish and kind of druggy pace, and it's an after-hours cut. I would definitely feel like this is one that you can listen to when you're overly stoned, just kind of in the after-hours, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., when things are kind of at a more sluggish kind of pace, just having munchies and that type of stuff, Chex Mix, some stuff like that, Pepsi, some of those type moments. But I would have to kind of say it's just kind of one that's just kind of more residential and around the house. I mean, Trap Problems feels like a more residential kind of bop, just kind of more kicking it around the house. It's not necessarily like a party cut, but it just kind of feels like one where you just kind of, maybe you have like Madden or Call of Duty going, something like that, or some PlayStation games, Prince of Persia, something like that. Just those kind of bops, just kind of in the background as far as that kind of goes. And it's just kind of more of like, just kind of after hours drear, I feel like, as far as that kind of goes. It's very sluggish and kind of drugged out a little bit, but just kind of in a good way as far as just having like some swishers and that type of stuff, just as far as that kind of being a murky type tune. I feel like Say So is a nice one. This is kind of a more breezy and boppish kind of tune. This is another one that has a little bit of a commercial pace. This is a house party bop, real residential type tune, kind of similar to Trap Problems. Not so much like a club cut, but it does kind of have some commercial fare about it. This song is kind of a Snow Bunny type cut. It's just a very glitzy and rousing type song. And this is a glitzy, rousing type song, and it just feels like an Instagram IG type song, definitely for that kind of bop. Just something that you'd probably see in you would have seen in like some IG models stories back in the day, something like that. Just kind of has, it's a little bit more rousing. Just kind of has like a lot more of kind of like a kind of candid, kind of like small talk, simping kind of feel towards it. Just a little bit more entry, just kind of one where it could be at like a house party, but it's just not wholesomely rousing like Look at My Dab or quite as smoke filled as Forest Whitaker or something like that. But it is kind of another nice gem for that sort of concept. It's another one that would definitely have just on the onslaught as far as just having like a shindig that's kind of more not so much stepping out and going to like a venue or something. I would say there's 15 songs on this project, and out of those 15 I wound up recommending 10, so I'm going to recommend those. So they would be Asking for Money, Burnt Out, Came from Nothing, Check, Forest Whitaker, Look at My Dab, Pamela, Say So, Slangin', and Trap Problems. So I feel like Check is kind of a tense trap hopper. It's just a local kind of decent shindig bop. It's a leery kind of beat, but it's very hypnotic. This is kind of one that Gucci Mane would do when he's kind of getting turned up, but he's not quite at a club. It's just kind of one for more of like a house party turned up kind of song. I feel like this is another kind of local one that's not quite as crazed and as set out as like Look at My Dab. It's just kind of a nice one. Feels like some of the stuff that Zaytoven would do and that type stuff. And another one like that is kind of Slanging. Slanging kind of has a wintry, chilly type feel about it. It's a hustle tune. Just has some chilling piano keys on there, and it's a very brisk type song, and this has like a focus kind of feel. This is another one, like there's some ones on here, like I feel like Trap Problems is another one like that. And there's at least another hustle song, like Burnt Out is another good hustle song for that sort of concept. But Slanging is just kind of one that just really feels like a more kind of cool, like not just October, November, but like December, January type tune. Definitely kind of a brisk type one. Good winter type tune for just kind of stepping out. I mean, it's residential. Slanging doesn't necessarily feel like a vehicle kind of thumper as much, but it does kind of feel like if you're just weaving through the streets and residential areas and that type of stuff, it's a good kind of wintry one for just being out and about. Maybe just walking to Taco Bell, something like that, KFC, some of those type places as far as that kind of goes. I feel like Came From Nothing is a nice bass heavy kind of thumper. This is like a vehicle knocker. This is a good one for stepping out a bit. And this is kind of like more of the typical 2010s type trap that this project doesn't have heavily on here, but it's kind of a nice one for that. It's a solid club jam, I would also have to say. And it's just kind of a chilly, kind of haunting beat on here. Came From Nothing really has like bass heaviness at the beginning of the verse, but it kicks into like a pretty menacing and kind of chilling piano type beat later on in the verse and that type of stuff. It's a real kind of ominous, kind of cool weather kind of knocker as far as that kind of goes. Especially a good song to pull up to and kind of cruise around and just kind of flash your vehicle and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. I feel like Asking for Money is another nice one. This has some brisk piano keys on there. It's just kind of a local trap hop type tune. And it's kind of another one that kind of feels like Migos from 2013 and Gucci Mane from 2013 and that type of stuff. It's a very festive kind of gem, and it's a pretty solid party cut. This is another rousing one. I feel like this is kind of like a more house party version of Look at My Dab. I feel like some of these, like Say So and Asking for Money, are some good house party type tunes. Yeah, I feel like Asking for Money, Say So, and Check are all some good local kind of house party type bops. So that's kind of the thing about it. They're not quite wholesomely as much in the club on this particular project. It has a lot of wintry kind of residential type tunes, some real good house party type bops, and a couple nightclub venue type songs like Look at My Dab and Forrest Whitaker. But I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. Like Pamela is a good one. Pamela's a nice one for going out and about. This is kind of a wintry, kind of blue blood chandelier like tune. It's just a very kind of addled kind of trap bop, and it just has a festive kind of feel about it. It's kind of bass heavy. It's another one that would be nice for a vehicle and that type of stuff. Nice for some vehicles, and this kind of has like a good festive feeling towards it. It's just kind of a more fancier one, or it's kind of one that's a little bit not quite as like just local house party kind of jerseys and basketball shorts and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just local kind of shindigs a little bit more, where it's kind of trap oriented. It still maintains that trap kind of trap house and kind of residential type feel towards it, but this has like a little bit more gloss as far as that kind of goes. Just a little bit more stepping out, kind of like the Versace type stuff that they wear and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Other fancy ones, I can't think of too many right now, but like I want to say maybe Gucci, some of those Gucci, Versace, some of those type ones, Prada, some of those type things that you would wear just for a more fancy type feel about it. Burnt Out is kind of a chilly and cold belly type beat on there. It's just a regular kind of hustle tune, and it's just some day commute for a hustler, that type stuff. I feel like it can be blue collar, but it just feels a lot more kind of like street oriented and more edgy, just kind of in a more rugged sense, just for that kind of concept. It's kind of, I mean, it's just about, I mean, some of these just kind of have the concept of just motivation, but it's just kind of in a more sense that it's just a hustler's kind of day commute type song. If you're not trying to listen to like pop and the makeshift type tunes of just like a more kind of broad and kind of get out there and get it and kind of in a more peppy kind of sense. This is just Migos' version of some kind of motivational kind of pep as far as that kind of goes. Just a nice one, but this is kind of in a more mixtape and kind of edgy, rugged kind of street sort of sense. So I just would have to say that's kind of a nice one just to be able to talk about some of these. So yeah, there's like what I noticed about this project is there's some hustle tunes on here like Burnt Out and like Trap Problems. There's some club bops on here like Look at My Dab and Forrest Whitaker. There's some kind of wintry type tunes on here like Slangin' and yeah, there's some wintry kind of tunes on here like Slangin' and Burnt Out, and there's kind of like some ones on here like are that are just more house party like songs like Check and Asking for Money and Say So. So there's just like a good assortment of kind of stuff on here. It's just kind of a good amalgamation of a lot of these. I feel like there's just some good concepts as far as that kind of goes. There's even a couple vehicle knockers in here like Came From Nothing and Pamela and some of those type ones. I just would have to say, and there's probably another vehicle song on here that I forgot to mention, but it's some of these ones that kind of have some bass heaviness as far as that kind of goes. But really, it's a pretty stellar project, I would have to say. Just to talk about some of the ones I didn't enjoy, for the most part, the 5 songs I didn't mention, which would just be Back to the Bando, the title track, Neighborhood Scientist, Rich Nigga Still Trappin', See What I'm Saying, the intro, and Unleashed. I mean, some of these like a few of these like Back to the Bando, Neighborhood Scientist, and Rich Nigga Still Trappin'. I just really didn't like the production arrangements of some of those. I mean, a lot of these were just kind of like the instrument mixtures and the beat mixtures for how some of these kind of went were just kind of a lot more sporadic and just kind of randomized as far as just not having a good essence. I feel like they needed more songs like Look at My Dab and Forrest Whitaker, some of those type tunes. They really didn't have an overabundance of like nightclub bops that they probably could have used. I think they probably could have packed that with a few more gems. I mean, there's a lot of trap and kind of local, kind of Zaytoven, Gucci Mane type trap tunes on here that are just a lot more ground level, where you're still kind of at the trap house, and some of those type moments where you're just kind of in a more residential area, just kind of in a more slang-in type attitude, I would have to say. But I just look after it. It's just kind of the concept that I feel like it's, I would say that this project is probably, surprisingly, now that I think about it, maybe 60-65% work and maybe 30-35-40% play. I think just in the concept of it, there's not an overabundance of songs on here that are really towards stepping out. I mean, most of these, when you think of like Slangin', Trap Problems, like Back to the Bando, Asking for Money, some of those type ones, Neighborhood Scientist. I mean, there's just kind of some concepts that just don't have an overabundance of just like full blown kind of stepping out in like a certain kind of way, but I do kind of feel like it just kind of has a little bit more determined kind of attitude about it. It's not to say that it's a bad project, and it's not. I mean, that's the thing. I'm going to give it a pretty high score. It's me talking about some of those ones that just didn't fit the beat arrangements, and there just were some other ones like I kind of like the kind of I did like the Asian type beat. I did like the Eastern and Asian type beat of Unleashed, but I wasn't vibing with that one as much. Just didn't quite mesh as quite as well as I would have liked it to. And See What I'm Saying was just not quite as compelling an intro for me. But I just look after it like me liking 10 songs out of 15, especially that being 2/3 of the project for a mixtape. I'm going to go ahead and give this mixtape like probably like an 8.75 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty damn good. Just the vast majority of it. I feel like it's pretty damn close to getting a 10 out of 10. There's just a lot of good, excellent stuff on here. And despite the fact that it's not like a full blown packed to the gills full of songs like Look at My Dab, which is basically one of the best songs on here. I mean, I would say just to download it, I would say to download this mixtape just for this song, Look at My Dab, just because of how infectious it kind of is. But there's just not a ton of songs like it. And there's really not any other song that has that kind of ravenous energy. I mean, normally Migos have songs like Fight Night and songs like, like Hannah Montana and Versace and some of those type tunes, but they're just not quite as lively this time. They do have some good trap bops and kind of local house party affairs, but their energy is just kind of toned down by like 1, 2, or even 3 notches on this project. So it's good. It's an 8.75, definitely pretty good. Some good songs on here like Check, Pamela, Say So, especially. Forrest Whitaker is a good smoking tune. Look at My Dab has some great energy. Trap Problems is like a nice murky kind of after hours cut. So there's just some good ones on here. There are some moments like that, but it's just kind of the concept that, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna wholesomely complain because this is a pretty stellar quality project. So 8.75. The social score though, I'm gonna give like a 7.25 though, just because I feel like it did have 4 music videos for it, but the energy of it's just kind of varied. It just kind of feels like they went back to the trap, kind of went more underground again, and just kind of toned down their energy and went more low key, which I feel like the concept behind that, they didn't quite have ravenous kind of gems on here like Bad and Bougie and Slippery and some of the more flashiness. And I know because Offset was in prison. They didn't know how long he was going to be in prison. It probably stunted their morale, but I kind of feel like it's just like, damn, just when you look at the ferocious energy and look at my dad, it's just kind of like, damn, this is kind of the situation about it. But I just would have to say the 7.25, but there is plenty of gems. Like I said, a good 10 songs just to be able to dissect and kind of have some pretty decent house party pops, some kind of more local affairs, just that type of stuff, get some snow bunnies, that type of situation. I just would have to say 7.25. In terms of the future, like there isn't one. Takeoff is deceased, RIP. I just would have to kind of say like Quavo has a project that's getting ready to come out, and Offset's getting ready to have a project. So there is some stuff if you're looking for solo projects from them. That's just kind of the thing.